Hey everyone, this is Nate and this is the Nader Tater channel. Alright, today we're going to really cover lots of settings or features of this Cheetah 5G router. I put many videos out there before with third-party routers. This is one of them. This one's been consistently the fastest, but there is a downside to it, and that's when you order it in the box, there are not any instructions with it. So I'm going to go through some of the basics, like how do I set it up, how do I make it work to start with, and then some of the more advanced questions like if you want to have this in a bridge mode or DMZ and hook up your own Wi-Fi mesh system or other routers behind it, or things like IPv6, how do you get that to work, how do you get custom APN, TTL, lots of other features that are out there and available in here. How do you get to them? The other one that is a common ask is the firmware, and they now have the ability, they've been releasing firmware updates, and now the user can actually update them. So I'll show you how you can access those and get the firmware, the latest, especially if you're one of the people that bought this several months ago. So I'll go through all of those. Of course, I do have a coupon code that you guys can use. It's still live. Hopefully we can keep it live for a while longer. I'll put that in the video description and the first comment down below for you guys to use. And then also I'll say I might not cover all the questions out there, so if there are any new questions, please put them in the comments down below. I'll try to get them in a future video or in a response to the comment itself. So let me just hop on my computer, and the rest of the video I'm really just going to go through all these different steps that I've learned or that Chester Tech Repairs have shared with me or on their website of things to do. So let's go and hop to it. Alright, so this is the website. This is the only place where my code is good at. And know that Alfredo from Chester Tech Repairs, he does actually assemble these and test them at his shop. I think it's in New Jersey. And there are other routers that have the exact same case that are available online, but they are not the same routers. So do know that this stuff is specific to the Chester Cheetah device. So on here on their website, I clicked on the guide. I guess here's the home page here. I guess of note, before I even get into it, is if this video is not helpful or doesn't answer any of your questions, they have a live chat that you can literally click down here, and I guess it goes to his phone or pings him because he has a 5-minute response time. I have not tested that, but in the times I have contacted him, he has been very quick to respond. So in here under the guide, this is a blog format. Being honest, it's not the ideal format out there because you have to kind of search for it, but in here is really important information that you do want to look through. And this first one I want to cover is the firmware. So unfortunately this does not give you a lot of information. It does give you a link here, and you can see that this was released just over a week ago, right? So end of April. So we can go in here and we can select this. This is a Google Drive document. I would say in general you do need to trust Google Drive files because when you type this in and go to it, it's going to go into ask you to download the file. I guess I'll show that to you just so you see what it looks like. So here's no preview available, and it's because it's a .bin file, which is a very common file that you use to flash routers. So you click download, it'll save it to your downloads folder, and then you can go into the router itself to update it. So I would recommend this is the first thing that you do. Even if you just got the unit, make sure it's the latest and greatest. This is 1.9.6. I can I'm connected my computer by Ethernet cable directly to this router just to make sure there's nothing in between. It's the cleanest connection possible, but you can connect to it through Wi-Fi or other means as well. And then I go to 192.168.100.1, which is the default IP address of this Cheetah device, and it's going to give you this login screen. The default one, I'll go ahead and unhide my password. The default is still admin. Obviously you can change that if you want it to be secure, but then you can log in here and we can see for me I am connected, and down here in the bottom there is a system upgrade tab, and this is where you want to upload that new firmware. So in here you can see I already have the 1.9.6. If you are confused about what your model is, you can see that right here. That is shown in some of these pages right here, you know, because he does have other routers, and you obviously want to get the correct firmware for the correct device. So confirm that your model number is correct, and then you can hit browse. You can go in there and find that file like I have right here, and then you can click open and then click system upgrade, and it will go through the upgrade process. The best kind of rule of thumb is after it updates and it restarts and boots back up, it's probably best to do a restore on the system. I think that's done here in maintenance. Yes, so maintenance, hit restore. That will do a factory like reset of the router. So obviously if you had any changes made, you'd have to redo them. But that is the cleanest way to make sure you don't run into any odd problems. So I do recommend you do that. Then you should be good to start messing with some of the other features that are out there. So one of them I want to cover is just when you get the box, after you say you do a firmware update, now you're ready to say, okay, how do I connect this thing? So obviously the first thing you have to do is you do need to have a SIM card in there. And if you have a home internet SIM card, T-Mobile home internet, that is, SIM card, that one does need a little extra attention than say a T-Mobile business SIM card or a Verizon SIM card. Alright, so if you have the T-Mobile home internet, you do need to have an IMEI that is in one of T-Mobile's group of IMEIs for all of their devices. It actually doesn't have to be your exact same one, but that's the best thing to use, because if you're taking the SIM card out of a gateway from T-Mobile, you know that that IMEI is not going to be on the network somewhere else. So you can take that one and you can do a revise here on this device, and this would fix the IMEI for this device if it needed to be something else. So you can type in your 15-digit IMEI, hit edit, and it will update the IMEI of this Chester Cheetah device to be what you want it to be. And that's all you have to do to get that set up. Now in here there are some other settings that you do want to play with. The first one I go to look for, honestly, is probably the network mode. And part of this new setting here for the 1.9.6 firmware is it gives you the ability to switch between being a 5G device or an LTE device. So some people, their 5G does not work well for them, either because of congestion or their signal is weak or whatever it could be, and they actually get better speeds on LTE. If that's your case, you can force this device to be just LTE and not in 5G at all. Or you can leave it in auto, which really is going to include both, and it's going to pick what it thinks is the best, but that's not always the best, meaning auto is not always the fastest. And then same thing here for the 5G network mode. There's NSA, which is non-standalone, and then there's SA, which is standalone. Now for me personally, even though I have standalone 5G available, it has not given me very good speeds typically. Other people, they get by far their fastest speed, like 650 megabits per second of download speeds on 5G SA. So you would need to test that. There are some things that I have noticed from viewers where they comment on SA. Sometimes it does some funky things, and I'm not exactly sure of what's happening or why it does that, but I've heard things like voice over IP calling does not appear to be as robust or work as often with 5G SA for some users versus NSA, which always does work. So I don't have the details of that, but just know that from my experience, NSA has been the most consistent and the one I typically rely on, but some people do find a lot of speed in SA depending on their specific tower and their setup. So basically what I do here is probably, for me, I go to network mode, I leave it in auto, but then on the 5G network mode, I change it to NSA personally, and I hit save. And then the next place you need to go is look at your lock bands, but what you can do is just see where you connect to start with. So There is a 5G info tab here, and it does give you some information. Note that I am in my basement. This is actually connected to a cell booster. That's a whole different story. I won't get into it, but this is not where I keep my gateway, and I actually have waveform 4x4 external antenna that I can hook up to this up in my third floor attic space that gives me the best speed. But in here you can see that for this one I'm on band N71 down here in the basement, but I get N41 and N25 upstairs as well. So let's go back to the Chester Cheetah device, and because these are laid out in a blog format and he has many pages now, what I often do is hit the search button, and then I'm going to do AT commands, because I want to see his AT commands wiki, which I think is great that he has it up here, but you do have to kind of search for it. And what this tells you is these different commands that you can copy and paste. And I realize that to some people this might seem confusing or lost, but that's why I'm doing this video, is to kind of show some of the stuff that's really not very hard to do. And the main one, the number one I use one, is this top one, this AT plus QCA info. And I go in here to AT commands now, and I just paste that in, hit enter, and it takes it a second to do. But what it's doing, this means a query carrier aggregation, I think, info, and it's showing me what my bands of connection are. So now it's showing I actually have N41 connection and N71 for my 5G, and this SCC is their secondary signal, and PCC is primary, you know, the cell signal there. So my primary is band 66. So I know that that's what this is connected to, but if I want to try something else, I can go in here to the band locking tab, and I can uncheck B66 if I wanted to, and that would give me an opportunity to check some other LTE, because it would force it into another band. So I can uncheck that, hit save, and then it will, you know, leave B66 and find another 4G anchor. Now you can keep doing that, and you can band lock yourself out of a signal where you won't have anything to connect to. So you do need to be cognizant of that, and you do need to know that there are lots of bands that have different pros and cons. So some bands are maybe better on latency, some bands are better for upload versus download, and like N71 is typically better for upload than N41 is, but you typically are going to trade off download speed. So you'll have to play with which ones work best for you, and so I don't have really the best advice on which one you should do, other than you should play around with some different ones. And if you want a list of some of the T-Mobile ones, I will put a link in the video description of where you can go and you can see the common T-Mobile bands. That way at least you know, like some of these are kind of irrelevant for T-Mobile, but you can search them out on the internet as well for Verizon or AT&T or any other carrier that you're using as well. So let me just go back here to the AT commands. Since I unchecked B66, now that was going to force it off of B66, and now it's on band 2. So that's how you can do the band locking. And then again, I can run a speed test by going to like speedtest.net or fast.com, wherever you really want, and check your speeds for download, for upload, and then your ping or latency. Those are the things you want to monitor and look at and find which setup works best for you. And I would encourage you to leave as many bands on and active, because this can aggregate, I think, up to 5 of them actually for download capability. So you only see 3 here. If I go up to the 3rd floor, especially if I put on my antennas, you know, I can get 4 or sometimes 5 bands aggregated together, which is really cool, and that's how you get your best speed. So that's one thing that you really want to check and work on. If you want to hook up your own router, then you know, after this, then I would encourage you to turn off some of the routing features on this guy. So we can go in here, and now we can search for DMZ in this guide, And this is how to use DMZ, so transparent NAT. So this takes away the NAT layer that this would add here. And this is, not bridge mode, but as he says here, it's as close to bridge mode as you're going to get with this device, at least with the way it is today. Alright, so I zoomed in a little bit. Hopefully it makes it easier to see. But what you can see here is we need to go to the network and local LAN tab. And then you need to look at what your DHCP server is sending out there. So you can actually turn some of this stuff off if you really wanted to. But let's go to this local LAN. And you can see the DHCP is turned on. This means that the router itself is going to be assigning DHCP addresses to computers like mine that's hooked up to it. If you turn this off and hit save, your devices will not connect to this unless they have a self-assigned IP address that falls within their range. So that would be on the default setup, it would be a 192.168.100 point something between 2 and 255. That would need to be the assigned thing. So the easiest thing is to leave it on, and then you know that you need to set up your device still to have a static IP, ideally between a 2 and 99, so outside of what it's assigning them. Alright, so in the firewall settings here, we can see that there's a DMZ, which is called Demilitarized Zone. We can turn that on, and then we need to set what the IP address is of the device we want the DMZ to be set at. So ideally you'd be setting up your secondary router, and you want to set it up like he shows here, where he shows on the bottom. This is just an example. Every person's personal router is going to look different because it depends on, is it an Asus, is it Netgear, what brand is it. But so here in his example, he set the static fix, so this is in the WAN mode settings of your personal router, not your LAN, right? But go to WAN, and you need to set a static fixed IP. And that would be, in this example, 192.168.100.2, and then you type in the subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, and then you want to tell it that this gateway is your default gateway and your preferred DNS. So you would type in this 192.168.100.1 into both of those fields like he shows there. And then in here, you would type in the 192.168.100.2 that we just set for our imaginary personal router and hit save. And now that is going to route all the traffic unfiltered, no firewall, to your personal router. So that's how you would do that, and that's how it would work. Now obviously if you want to use this to do any kind of port forwarding, that stuff can be right here where you can click add a rule. You can name it whatever you want, and you can tell it if you want it to be TCP or UDP or both, and then what the port number is, as well as what the internal IP address is for it to go to, and what ports for it to go to in there. So alright, the other thing I wanted to show, and this one's still on the top of the page here, is how to do the IPv6. So for IPv6, there are a few things that you want to do, and I think he has another help page here as well that you do want to follow, and that is specifically for this Cheetah. So he actually has a YouTube video out there of going through of how to do some of this IPv6, but on this one specifically for this 520N-GL, it looks like a little bit of a bug in this, that sometimes it doesn't fully set. So what he says to make sure, his surefire way of making sure it works is in the maintenance, go to restore system, which I already talked about, and then it says unplug the power unit from the wall, not from the unit here, but unplug it from your wall and plug it back in. And then in here you want to go, so let me just show you again where that maintenance down here in the bottom, and then restore, that's what you do first. Then you do the power cycle, and then he says to go into the network and enable NAT6 and hit save. So if we go in here to the network and then go to the IPv6 part, we can see that I already have the NAT6 flag toggled over, and then you hit save. That is going to make sure that that is working. And then as well in here in the working mode, you want to make sure that that one is set up as a IPv6 as well. Okay, and then over here, the next step is to actually go to the 5G network page and make sure that your IP type is also at the 6/4. I think by default, sometimes it does not have that IPv6. It's just IPv4. So you switch it to be IPv6 and IPv4. And then after each of these changes, you got to make sure you hit save at the bottom of the page. So now it says to go, for him it says leave the APN as auto, but then it says go to 5G info and make sure that your IPv4 and 6 have addresses are displayed. So we go in here, what that means is on this page go up and to the 5G info page, and then you want to see that you actually have IP addresses for both of those. If you do not see this IPv6 address, that tells you that IPv6 is not working as far as getting it from your ISP. Alright, so now that's saying that that one is working, and there are some places that you can go to actually make sure that works. Alright, so you can actually go to test-ipv6.com, and that will actually run a test to see if you are actually connected using IPv6 or not. And here you go, you can see that after I did those check marks, it shows that I do have IPv6 connectivity. The only little warning area I get is that my browser is avoiding using it, and so that is a setting that you can change. But that is something that you can check before I did those steps. In here, it would give me a 0 out of 10 saying that I did not have IPv6 connectivity. So you do have to make those changes in order to get IPv6 to work. And what a lot of people will tell you is that their ping, their latency, got improved once they turned on the IPv6 connection, because you are able to access the internet faster with less stops along the way for the translation of the IPv4 address for anything that is capable of doing IPv6. I know that's a lot of lingo in there, but just know that it's better to do IPv6. Alright, in the APN settings, you might see that there are a couple other options, and you see that I have some custom ones that I added in there myself. And this is really kind of two reasons that you might need one. One is for Verizon home internet SIM card, it needs a specific V5GA01 internet. So to get the static IP from T-Mobile, it needs to be the business SIM card, and then you need to go into this 5G network and over here, and we do the APN tab, and then we need to change this type to IPv4, and then you need to add a custom APN, so we can call this whatever, static IP, and then the APN is at b2b.static, and then username and password can be blank, so I can add that in here. And now you can see, and now I need to go back and change that to click this one here. I need to change this to IPv4 and hit save, and let's see what else it says. Okay, so once I hit save, I need to reboot the machine and go to maintenance. For a lot of these settings, I guess it's worth noting, for like APN changes, for band locking you don't have to, but for a lot of them, if something doesn't seem like it's holding or working right, do a reboot of the system after you make some of these changes, and that will that's kind of the easy button to press to make sure that things are actually working properly. And then go to maintenance and restart the system. That's just how you reboot it. Once it's rebooted, it says to go into the AT commands and type in this to see that. Okay, but so since I'm not actually doing that for this test, I'm going to leave it off that. I'm going to leave it on auto. What you'll also notice though is that there is a Verizon custom one in here, and that one is because Verizon's auto setting does not work. It doesn't pick the correct APN, so you need to do a manual one for Verizon, and that's this 5GA01 internet, and that is important to do. And there is actually one other trick that you need to do in order to make sure on Verizon specifically that it doesn't leverage the auto setting. So to do that one, I'm going to go back here to the guide to show you that one. I think I'm just going to type in Verizon. That might be the best way for me to get to it. Right here, yeah, so home sim in Chester Cheetah. So this is telling you this is a step you do need to take for Verizon Home Internet SIM card if you really want to get the correct APN for it to work properly, and that's to disable the auto APN. So you would type in these two different commands one at a time. So this top line, first you go in here to the AT commands wherever it's at, and then hit paste and hit enter, and then you'll go in here and copy and paste this one done. And then what I've seen is that you actually do not need to do the IMEI revised procedure. You can leave it as it is, but Verizon might send you an email and ask you to update your account because it found a new device. So the easiest thing to do to help keep things clean is to actually do this IMEI revised procedure. And that way it's the same as your Verizon gateway that it's expecting. But you don't have to do that. It does work, but it probably is better to do it. On T-Mobile, you don't have a choice. You must do an IMEI revise in order to get it to work. Then you show that APN is done. Finally, you want to do the IPv4/6, like we said, and do a restart. Now, you can revert those changes if you want it to go back and default to auto APN selection, just by typing in this command to the AT command window, and that will get you back to there. Alright, let's talk about the built-in Wi-Fi. You know, if you are hooking up your own system, obviously you can just turn off the Wi-Fi on this device so that it's not, you know, kind of interfering or taking up some of your airways with more signals. So you can just hit off and hit save for both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz if you wanted to. Or you can also, the top here, you know, band aggregation is where both your 5G and your 2.4 G, or really I should say gigahertz, Wi-Fi are either the same name or they're different names. I typically always like mine to be different names, so I don't aggregate those bands together, and I separate them out. So you can see here I have one called just 5G CPE and one's 5G CPE 5G, which is pretty confusing sounding, and that's because you're mixing 5G cellular and 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, which can be confusing to some. But you can go in here and change. You can also select specific channels if you want to. There are some apps out there that you can use, like on your phone or your tablet, and it will help tell you what channels are being leveraged right now. The auto one is going to try to find a section of the channels that is least busy, and it will try to pick that. So those are things that you can go in here and change. Now, if you have trouble with your devices connecting, you can change some of these. Bandwidth is one of the common ones that you will need to lower, and this changes the megahertz of the bandwidth. The lower one is more compatible with older devices, as well as you can turn off the Wi-Fi 6 mode, which might also help with some of your really old devices. It's supposed to be backwards compatible, but it's not always that compatible. So those are things you can change there. Also, it does have a guest network, so a guest Wi-Fi. And not only does it give you maybe another name that you can give your guests, you don't have to give them your main password. You can make it insecure with no password at all, so that anyone can just connect to it. And what a guest Wi-Fi typically does is that it blocks that traffic from accessing the rest of your devices in your network. It only gives those devices on the guest network access to the internet. And so that can just help keep your files, computers, your own personal devices a little bit more secure versus having them give full regular Wi-Fi access. So I use my own mesh system here at my house, so I actually don't use the Wi-Fi on this device. I just use Ethernet port connected, so I have guest Wi-Fi turned off on mine. Alright, so hopefully that answers a lot of your questions that you've had. You know, those were the most common ones that were asked to me, as well as ones I had when I was setting it up myself for the first time. So that covers a lot of them. You know, this router doesn't have as many features or settings as some other ones do, but I really do still like this. I've been using this for months now, and it is consistently the fastest for me every time. And so that's really why I have it, and it has enough settings that I'm able to go to DMZ mode. I can do my custom APNs or band lockings. That's really what I need out of a gateway to work best with T-Mobile and Verizon, is those features that it does have. And then all of my more advanced router settings and mesh setup is yet another system. So I realize that's maybe complicated for some people. They don't want to get that busy, and this certainly is capable of being your only 5G gateway and router, and it does have the Wi-Fi built into it. So it is a standalone capable unit, but for some people they might still want some more settings, and in that case they really might want this to be more like a modem and not do the routing features. So that's where that DMZ feature will really come into play. And there's really two things I would say that have made this go from fast to like really fast, and that is making sure your band locking, you've messed with it, and you might have to change that based off of even time of day with T-Mobile, because they do so much messing around with your connection when there's congestion. So if you see that you get a really big drop off in speed during congestion, you might want to look at going to like just 5G SA or something during times of congestion, or try different band during times of congestion, so that you maintain the best performance out there. And then the other thing that really helped is that IPv6. So getting your IPv6 to be active and working, especially if all your downstream devices can connect with IPv6 as well, that should show you a improvement in your ping, which is something that will really improve your user experience regardless of how fast your download and upload speeds are. So that's all I have for now. Stay tuned for more videos. As always, consider subscribing if you have not already. And thank you for the likes, comments, and sharing.